There we go. So I am just going to put my presentation on. Here we go. Now, can you see that okay? I suddenly can't see. You can't? Deep breaths. Can you see that?
Yay, well done.
Great day. Okay, so welcome to the practical session of carbon. So last time we were dealing with mindset, and Bethia took you through thinking about some of the barriers that kind of inhibit this piece of important work on sustainability. And hopefully throughout your kind of focus sessions, you've been able to have a think about what it is that holds you back when it comes to sustainability in the workplace. And now we're going to kind of move on to more practical session. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide just to do an overview of what we focused on. So initially we had our introduction to the program, then kind of mindset week, and now we're coming on to here, practical action week. And we're basically going to talk a little bit about why we are doing this stuff, and then that will be complemented hopefully by the kind of focus areas that I've set for you between the next week. And then in the focus tasks, I'll take you through a kind of planning exercise, because we know that carbon is such a huge part of sustainability that we can't possibly would only touch on it in one session. So I just wanted to give you the tools on what to focus on and how to do that in terms of planning and prioritization, rather than kind of walk you through every kind of step of the way. And that's something that potentially we would be able to offer as a kind of add-on course if you wanted more support with that. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the kind of whys. So we've talked about the barriers, but there are loads of things that you can do. It can feel like an overwhelming prospect, but if we break it down into kind of manageable chunks, then we can achieve whatever we've planned for. And that's the thing, there's quite often a kind of doers versus thinkers argument, but actually doers do more planning than anybody else. If you think of an expedition, you would need to plan everything intricately in order to make sure you were safe and it was efficient and you completed the challenge that you were set. So kind of think of it as that. And I don't know if you've seen this picture before, but it was kind of doing the rounds. And this is a man who is holding a picture up and behind him is the forest that he planted sort of 40 years ago. So that's what it looked like before in the picture, and behind him is the forested mountain. And there's plenty of other examples, not just tree planting, but that is quite a visual good one, where, you know, there's another chap in India who sort of vowed to plant one tree a day and carried on doing so for 20 years, or even longer. And now there's this incredible kind of forest landscape. So looking at it now, you'd think, gosh, I could never do that. But what I'm saying is just, it takes time and energy, and just do it at your own pace. We know that there's pressure, but sometimes that pressure can cause us to freeze, and we need to just plan it appropriately so that we know exactly the pace that is sustainable. And if we can then push that up further once we've done the basics, then that's great, but we can only do what we can do. So here, I don't know if you're a dreamer or a doer or a thinker or a bit of all three, which is most of what most people are, but we're here to create positive, practical action. And a little reminder of why we're doing this. So the first thing is that there are networking opportunities. So when we work together on something like sustainability, which is really a kind of ethos piece, it brings together other people who also have the similar ethos. And it means that we're supported in a community that has got the same ideal goal. So networking is a really key benefit of working on something like sustainability. Clients at the moment have really started a trend of wanting to work with and contract with people and businesses who have more of a green mindset and are working towards sustainable goals. It's become more sort of in the popular focus, and that's something which is important. So in terms of money, we've talked about the challenges when it comes to finances and sustainability. However, there will be a payoff, not only with the planet, but also financially. As this becomes something where the pressure increases and increases, and we have to act faster and faster, there will be policy changes which mean that businesses have to take the leading edge in terms of sustainability. And this will bring profits. And not only that, but although for some things, like we were talking about, renewable energy installations, they require capital, but almost certainly you will get your capital back, even more than what you put in. So it is a big decision, but it's one worth making for the long term. And it's important to have a long-term view. So businesses that are sustainable are also more attractive to their customers, more attractive to contracts. So recently I was talking to somebody who works on a lot of government work, and he said that there's been a huge change in the sustainability requirements of those contracts, presumably defence type contracts. But so there is a change, and the pressure will be on, whether it comes from yourselves or from the government. It's better to be in control of those decisions, and this is a really positive start. So the image of the company can also be really boosted by sustainable action, because this sets you out against the others who aren't considering it in the same way. It gives you a kind of leading edge, this kind of you're thinking of a business that's thinking of the future, a business that is thinking about the planet, about the environment, about its people, thinking about that triple bottom line, that planet, people, profit. And that is something which looks really good. So it's really important that we sort of embrace this as a concept as a whole, and a new concept on business. And ultimately, the responsibility for looking after the planet, for limiting climate change, or limiting the effects of climate change, and reducing our impacts, and more so being not only carbon neutral, but carbon positive or planet positive. The responsibility is with us all. We are all members of this planet. We all contribute, and we all have a responsibility to look after it for ourselves and for future generations. So there are many, many reasons why we should be doing this, especially when it comes to carbon, which is one of the biggies on this. And so I'm going to take you in a slightly different direction now and ease off. So sometimes when you get it's like kind of writer's block. You're not quite sure where to start, and then you don't start, and then you're not quite sure which direction to start in. And there's all these sorts of things which, like Bethy was talking in her mindset session, can be real blockers to making real progress. And one which often comes up is that people are striving for this kind of perfect model where they're feeling like they are so far away from being net positive that they just can't even begin the journey. So what we're saying is be aspirational. It's about the right direction, not perfection. And just remember that, you know, the hard work will pay off. You probably at school or something heard the quote by Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb. It's something like, it's 99 perspiration and 1% inspiration. So if you think about, you know, making a light bulb, it's not like, wow, I've got a good idea. It's like 99% of the time is trying stuff and trying stuff and trying stuff and doing that work. And 1% of the time is when you really kind of unlock it. And some of the easy ways to unlock it are just from having these easy wins. So we'll talk about that in a second. A few things which kind of get you into the mood. So, you know, like with writer's block, people say, well, just put anything on the page. That'll kind of help you. And there are actually some really big things which you can do pretty easily, which kind of start you on that on that step in the right direction. So the third thing which really helps is to have SMART objectives or SMART goals. So be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound when you're setting your goals, because that will help you to be much more focused and more likely to succeed when you're trying to sort of achieve a particular goal that you're setting. So you might set a goal like, we want to cut down our carbon emissions by, I don't know, 2% in the year. Then sort of try and have that as an objective, but choose something which is achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Our own government has been found to make unambitious goals that are too ambitious and unachievable, and they've been held to account by the courts. So don't follow in their shoes, be smart and set SMART goals. And you might think, oh, well, I'm only a small fish in this pond, you know, I'm not going to make that much difference. But actually, in Britain, 99.3% of businesses are small to medium enterprises like you. So as a small business, you can have a really big impact. So, you know, you're contributing to this cause. So the easy wins, here we go, the light stuff. It's really easy to go on a renewable energy tariff. We'd recommend Octopus Energy. It's 100% green. You could, if you've got gas, then you can choose this super green Octopus tariff, which kind of also offsets your carbon emissions. And also they've been kind of well recommended, not only by kind of energy experts, but also the consumer market. So Which magazine says they're kind of number one for renewable energy providers. They take smaller profits, they're more flexible, more transparent, which means that they're not these big, greedy, huge energy companies, which we've seen have gone bust quite a lot recently, but they're much more kind of dynamic. Also, they're said to have really good customer service, which does make a difference when you're just trying to sort this stuff out. You can get incentives from referring to other companies or customers. And this stuff, you know, it's an absolute minefield. You can get really distracted by trying to research and research and research and research, but have faith in people you know and trust, and have faith in experts, and also in kind of advisory lists, consumer lists, because there's no way that you can research every single aspect in enough detail. So you need to be able to trust the recommendations. So second here, go carbon positive. So going carbon positive feels like a big goal, and offsetting is something that we've all heard of. Again, don't get too distracted with trying to get right down to the details. Go for the best that you can for the moment. There is no perfect solution, and it might be that you just need to be a little bit creative. So think about you know, instead of big schemes, although some of those are really good, and we would recommend ecology with an I. You could also help more locally. So you could support, say, a local tree planting group, or an organisation which is doing loads of good things to promote sustainability, or you know, an organisation which you really care about and which you know will reduce emissions in total. So there are other ways of doing it. The third one is going back to basics. So we've heard this: reduce, reuse, recycle. Been hearing it for years. I remember it at school. There's, you know, it's a whole kind of thing, but still only 35% of small to medium enterprises recycle their waste. So if you can make sure that you go through these simple steps, reduce it if you can, reuse it when you can, and recycle it if, you know, it's kind of the last port of call. And think about which organisations you're using to deal with your waste. So Viridor, for example, have a goal of being net zero by 2045. So try and think about whether they've got sustainable goals. So those are some really dead easy things that if all SMEs did those things, then they would immediately reduce their emissions quite substantially. So onward. So these are some things which are kind of key areas to consider when reducing your carbon emissions. And some of them might be a little less obvious than, you know, the ones which you immediately associate. So travel, you know, it's a thing that people usually leap to straight away, but there are lots and lots of other ways that you can do it. So I've broken it down to, oh, someone's in the waiting room. Sorry, just admit them.
Probably cares, I think.
No, said someone different.
Oh.
Anyway, so
yeah, it's me.
Recording in progress.
Oh, it is. Oh. Hi, guys. Okay. So getting to grips with some of these things can really help structure what we can do to reduce emissions. So, for example, thinking about the source and scale of the emissions, where are they coming from? And that's kind of the very first step. So thinking about, people talk about baselining. So trying to work out exactly where the most of your emissions are coming from, and then you can go on to the next step, reductions. So how to reduce those things. And in our kind of focus areas, I will sort of get you to think about these things in a way which hopefully will make sense, will be logical, and will help you to come up with a really good plan to tackle these head on and be proactive and think about everything in kind of SMART goals. So this should break it down so that it really is achievable. So why are we thinking about this? So emissions directly from travel. What do you want the future to be like? Today on the radio, I was listening to an interesting program where they were kind of modelling exactly what things would be like if we continued the way we are. In 50 years' time, what would the air smell like? What would it be like in terms of noise in the city? What wildlife would we hear? And that was a really powerful thing, because we need to think about, what do we want our future to be like? Do we want it to continue as it is? And I think most people will say, no, we need to come up with better ways, and those better ways almost certainly include reducing emissions, especially from travel. The further down the line is supply chain. So this is often referred to as kind of scope 2 or scope 3 things, so things which are not immediate in your workplace, but are more kind of systemic changes. And we encourage you to really think about the environment in every decision or making process. And thinking about your supply chain is a really good way of doing this, because it just breaks down, what is it that we're doing? Why are we buying that thing? Do we need to buy it? If we're buying it, are we buying the right thing? Are we buying it from the right people? So that is a larger piece of work, but it's one that can be done over time. And in order to get buy-in for this, we've talked about the senior people needing to kind of be on board with it. And the way that most people respond best is when you're positive and when you make it kind of fun, easy to interact with, and in a kind of corporate sense, it is beneficial to kind of incorporate more than one goal at a time. So why don't you have a competition, for example, between teams on how you can reduce your emissions? So at the same time, boosting morale and team building, but also reducing your emissions at the same time. Or why don't you link it up to other kind of goals that you have, business goals that you have, some of your KPIs, so that you're marrying this up with things that the business already cares about. So it's not an extra thing to do, it's just something that's done sort of simultaneously. So use the available tools. There are loads of free tools or very low cost tools available. For example, a carbon calculator, which we will give you a link to in the materials. But use these free tools. They're there for you to use. They're often designed by experts. Just have a look at them and use them to your advantage. Food. Every office has food, whether it's a canteen, whether it's people bringing in their own food. But obviously food contributes to landfill and emissions, and emissions in the production of food. So this is something which we do need to consider when trying to reduce our carbon emissions. And there are loads of really creative ways of doing this. So one example I saw or heard about was a company that in their canteen, they made all vegetarian food free. Not because they were encouraging everyone to be vegetarian, but that that would encourage people to think about where their food came from. And that would mean that they would make more sensible choices about what they ate. And then that might encourage them, because vegetarian food was free, to go vegetarian instead of the meat one, and reduce their carbon emissions. So there are quite a few of these, but we'll just kind of flick through, and the details will really come down to the kind of focus areas. So diversifying your fleet. So this sounds like a bit of a fancy term if you're a small business, but just keep on the lookout for schemes for electric cars, or think about how you could kind of change your transportation and what that would look like in the future. So again, in this radio program where they were mimicking what the air would be like in 50 years' time, before that they'd asked the senior leadership team of this big company to try and consider their options in terms of public transport. They said no, can't even imagine having, using public transport for what we do. We love our cars. There's no other way. It's not very easy. And then the simulation of what the air feels like and smells like in 50 years' time made them immediately reconsider. So it's very, very powerful, that kind of direct experience. So if you can, again, going back to buy-in, think about it in a very more tangible way than just graphs and statistics, then that does have real impact. So make a commitment to this. There are lots of climate commitments that you can make. You can make a pledge in your business so that you'll stick to it, and that it's something that is there alongside your commercial goals, your sustainability goals too. So tech is a bit of a surprising one, I guess. So Bethia earlier was talking about servers, and how actually just the amount that we store on our computers can have a big effect on how much energy they require for websites to be kept on servers. And like there's loads in Iceland and Greenland and places like that, so that they're cold places where servers can run and not get so hot, for example. So thinking about how we store our information, thinking about our what we use for the norm, not only in kind of the products we use, but also the way that we use them, can vastly reduce our emissions. And finally, I've put creatively educate. So nobody, especially senior leadership teams, wants to be kind of preached at or forced to do something. But this is your chance to really be creative. So one way, which is quite clever, is to practice green seasoning. So this is just kind of like you season a meal. You merely just pepper your working life with green ideas. So, for example, you could have a slot in every single meeting for 2 minutes at the beginning has to highlight sustainable goals. It could be that on your policies, you make sure there is a certain ratio of green policies within your policy documents. It could be that your outings that you have with your colleagues have kind of environmental strategies, even if it's not a main focus. So creatively educate, think about, being upbeat, being fun, being positive, and getting people on board in different ways. So let's stop talking and start doing. So basically, it's a bit like cooking. It's a bit like a recipe. We've got to the stage where we've got all the bits in place. We've measured out all the various ingredients, and now we just need to put it into practice. We've thought about how many people we're going to feed, i.e. how many people we're going to use in order to make this happen. We've thought about what meal is appropriate for our companies, i.e., what strategy, what plan will work best for our companies. And, cooking is a process which takes time and energy and thought and planning. And much like this sort of sustainable journey, it does, but it's also essential, much like cooking and eating. So it's really important just to get on with it, that food is not going to cook itself, and this sustainable business is going to go in a sustainable green direction if the pressure is kept on a little bit, and in a positive way that keeps people going rather than blocking. So think of it as a meal, if that helps. Finally, just by way of support, there's still loads of ways that you can contact us if you need help. So we've got a Facebook group. Next week, we are hosting a kind of implementation Zoom. So we will be there for a sort of one-to-one session or a drop-in session. You don't necessarily need to use it, but if it would help, we will be online at the same time next week. So the resources that you'll get hopefully will help you come up with a really good plan of action. And it uses some good tools like, Kez will be familiar, the prioritization matrix, which is a pretty useful thing for deciding what you need to do first, and is less scary than it sounds. And just breaking it down so that we can take things a bit at a time, do those easy bits first, and with bite-sized chunks we'll make progress, which is what it's all about. Remember, initially we talked about direction and not perfection. And we'll give you plenty of resources to look up should you want to kind of pursue a more technical angle when it comes to carbon saving. So thank you very much. That ends week 2.
Well done, Jess.
Practical carbon session.
Do we want people to let us know in advance about the implementation thing?